It was May 1963 on the quiet north side of Yellowstone, not far from the Montana line, when the ground first started to hum under my boots. We had come in on old green trucks before sunrise, past locked park gates, and angry tourists turned away with a story about fire danger. The air was cold enough to bite, but it smelled wrong, like hot coins and bad eggs mixed together. Thin steam drifted across the road in slow sheets. It felt like the whole place was breathing. My name does not matter much now. Back then, I wore sergeant's stripes and thought I had seen enough field time to read any patch of dirt. But the basin they sent us into did not match any map they showed us at Fort Lewis. The trees thinned too fast. The birds went quiet all at once. Every few minutes, a soft white dust fell out of a clear blue sky and melted cold on my skin, and under it all, that low, steady hum kept getting stronger. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. We set up our first camp just past a line of stunted pines that looked burned, even though there had been no fire that season. The ground was warm under the topsoil. My squad kept shifting their feet, like they were standing on a big slow engine. I tried not to show that it bothered me too, but the steady pulse crawled up my legs. We were 11 men and 2 civilians. The civilians kept to themselves. One carried a case of instruments and kept checking small glass tubes every few minutes. The other watched us more than he watched the land. He never said his job, but anyone who spent enough years in uniform could guess the type. The lieutenant walked the perimeter with a clipboard he never looked at. Orders were simple on paper. Build a short fence of wire, place markers along the ring of steaming vents, and keep people out. That was the official part. The part we talked about among ourselves was the smell in the air and how it changed every time the wind turned. We pitched tents in a half circle. The medic checked everyone for headaches and nosebleeds. Command had warned him about the gas pockets. He did not like any of the readings, but he tried to act calm. The radio man climbed a low ridge to find a clear signal. He said he heard a faint voice that sounded like a man calling distances, the way artillery spotters do. He could not trace the source. By noon, the sun was bright, but the basin felt dim, like the light had trouble settling on the ground. White dust fell again in thin flakes, slow and quiet. It melted on cloth like frost. When it landed on bare skin, it felt cold for a moment, then left a strange dry patch. The machine gunner brushed it off me and laughed, but his hands shook. We walked the first survey line with the geologist. He pointed out cracks in the rock that were too straight to be natural. He said the tremors moved in waves, not bursts. I asked what that meant. He said he did not know yet. The intelligence man wrote everything down. Near a cluster of steam vents, we found a dead bison. No wounds. Its eyes were filmed white, and its hide had a thin crust of that same pale dust. The lieutenant ordered us to leave it alone, but I noticed the compass hanging from my chest rig swing in a slow circle every time I got close to the body. Later that afternoon, we set up motion wires and small charges meant to test soil density. The charges were light, meant for mapping, not flighting. The ground swallowed the blasts with dull thuds. Instead of kicking up dirt, the shock seemed to sink down. The men spoke less as the day went on. Even small tasks felt heavy. Every now and then, the hum underfoot rose a little, like something deep below had taken a slow breath. When it quieted again, the air went colder, even in sunlight. I tried to log everything in my small notebook, but some moments slipped past me, as if the hours stretched and folded. One step would be normal ground, the next would be warm enough to fog my glasses. We ate early and sat close. No fire, by order, because of the vents. As the sky dimmed, the geysers around the basin erupted out of their usual pattern. The blasts came higher and sharper. Some tilted sideways in narrow white streams. The ashfall thickened with each eruption and settled on our tents like thin snow. We turned in, but sleep did not come easy. I lay still, listening to that slow pulse in the dirt. It matched the rhythm of the last geyser blast. I could tell the others heard it too. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but the land felt aware of us. I kept my boots on inside the bag. Just before I drifted off, a soft tremor passed under the camp. Our tent poles rattled. For a moment, the hum sharpened, almost clear enough to take a shape, and a faint cold drift touched my cheek like breath from an open cave. I told myself it was the wind. But the trees outside were still. Morning came with weak light and a sharp chill. I stepped out of the tent and found a thin layer of white dust over everything. It had settled on our rifles, our packs, even inside the boot prints we left the night before. When I brushed it off my sleeve, it left the cloth dry and faintly marked, like something had soaked into it. The others noticed the same thing. No one made jokes this time. We gathered for a quick meal. The medic checked us again. A few men had mild nosebleeds. He blamed the cold air and dry wind, but he kept wiping his hands on his trousers and staring at the dust on his palms. The radio man tried to raise command, but the signal was thin and delayed. Each time he spoke, a faint echo of his own words came back a moment later. He changed frequencies again and again, but the echo followed. The geologist wanted to push deeper into the basin that day. His map had a ring drawn in pencil around a cluster of vents about a mile east. He said that was the center of the readings. The lieutenant agreed. Orders were to place more sensors and mark the ground for the next set of charges. I assigned men to carry the equipment, checked our ammo, then took point. The walk felt longer than a mile. The ground shifted from firm soil to warm patches of pale mud. Steam moved across our path in slow rising threads. Every few minutes, the hum returned, stronger than before. It felt like walking over a heartbeat that did not belong to anything alive. The trees thinned until only dead stumps remained. Their bark had the same pale crust as the bison. About halfway in, we found signs of an older camp. A rotted rope lay tangled in the roots of a fallen tree. A rusted mess kit rested in the mud. The odd part was a small field dressing wrapper half buried under the dust. It was from a newer issue, the kind we carried, but the edges were worn in a way that made no sense for something left only a few years. The medic turned it over slowly in his hand. It crumbled at the touch. We moved on with less talk. The wind stopped completely as we approached the vent cluster. The air felt tight, as if everything around us held its breath. We placed the first sensor on a flat rock. The device clicked faster than expected, showing gas levels that made no pattern the geologist could explain. Each vent released a slow swirl of steam that stretched sideways, not upward, even though the air was still. The intelligence man asked the geologist questions in a low voice. I saw the geologist's jaw clench while he answered. He glanced at us now and then, almost guilty. Something about that look stayed with me. A tremor rolled under our feet as we worked. It was not strong, but it carried a cold gust along the ground. The dust lifted in small rings, as if drawn by some hidden current. One of the riflemen stepped back, startled, and nearly fell into a pool of thin gray water. I caught his pack and hauled him upright. The water had no smell, but the surface rippled in a slow pulse, matching the hum. We finished marking the area and started the return. The basin felt larger on the way back, as if the landmarks had slipped when we were not looking. The ridge where the radio man stood the day before looked farther away. The path curved in a way none of us remembered. I kept checking my compass, but the needle drifted a few degrees every time I stopped to read it. When we reached the ridge, the radio man waved us over. He looked shaken. He said he picked up a faint signal while we were gone. Not from command, not from any known unit. It sounded like English spoken in clipped older wording, callouts that used ranges and yards, not meters. He tried recording it, but the sound faded each time he pressed the button. All he caught was a faint voice saying a number, then silence. We spent the late afternoon reinforcing the wire and packing gear for the next move. The lieutenant sent a patrol to scout a route to a grove to the north, a place we planned to use as a fallback point. When they returned, they reported finding a half-buried concrete slab near the tree line. It had no markings, only a rusted metal hook fixed into one side. The lieutenant said we would check it the next day. As the sun dipped, strange shadows stretched across the basin. They pointed in odd directions, not matching the angle of the light. Every long shape moved with the falling dust, thin and slow, as if the ground was trying to draw lines around us. We turned in early again. I lay awake listening to the wind outside. It did not sound like normal wind. It moved in a steady rhythm, like something shifting deep under the rock. Now and then, a soft bit of dust drifted through a seam in the tin and settled on my cheek, cold as the morning frost. I tried to steady my breathing. There was no reason to feel trapped. We were trained for worse places. But the basin felt wrong in a quiet way, like an empty hallway where you know someone has just stepped out of sight. When sleep finally came, it broke fast. Another tremor jarred my cot. The hum rose again, slow and deep. I sat up and felt the pulse through my boots. It matched the same slow rhythm from the vents that morning, as if the whole basin had shifted closer while we slept. The next morning, the lieutenant had us move toward the grove where the patrol saw the concrete slab. We carried full packs and weapons ready. No one spoke much. The hum under the ground had grown steadier, like a slow drum beat. It stayed in my legs even when I tried to ignore it. The grove sat on slightly higher ground. The trees were thin and gray, as if winter had stayed only for them. The concrete slab lay at an angle, half sunk into the soil. A rusted hook stuck out from one corner. Moss covered most of the surface, but when I brushed part of it clean, I saw faint lines in the concrete. Not letters. More like marks left by a tool dragged across it over and over. We dug around the edges and found the top of an old doorway under the dirt. It sloped down into darkness. The lieutenant sent me, the medic, and one rifleman to check it. We used ropes and climbed down a short drop. The air inside carried a cold smell like rock that had never seen sun. Our flashlights picked out an old bunker, maybe built in the 1920s or earlier. Rusted bunks lined the far wall. A torn jacket lay across one cot. The style looked like something from the days before the war. When I lifted it, the cloth came apart like dry leaves. The medic found a logbook on a metal shelf. The leather cover cracked as he opened it. The entries dated back to 1918. A cavalry troop had been sent here because tourists vanished near the northern basin. The troop reported strange lights above the vents and animals found dead with no marks. The last pages spoke of a deep hum under the ground that grew stronger each night. One sentence caught my eye. It said, "The pit answers thought, not sound." Another read, "Seal it or feed it." Before we finished reading, a tremor shook the bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. The hum rose in a sharp pulse, like a long breath pressed through stone. Our flashlights flickered. I felt a cold drift pass behind me, though nothing stood there. The medic closed the logbook quickly. We climbed out and sealed the slab with rocks. The lieutenant listened to our report with a tight jaw. The intelligence man asked to see the logbook right away. He read the last page twice, then slipped it into his own pack. The geologist looked pale when he heard the date. He took out his map and circled 2 more spots where older tremors had happened in past decades. He said the pattern matched, though he would not explain how. Near midday, we pushed toward the center of the basin again. The dust fell in soft pulses, not steady, as if something pushed it from above in slow breaths. It melted on our skin with a cold bite. The rifleman walking behind me wiped his face and said his hand felt numb afterward. I checked it. No color change, but the skin was dry as chalk. At one vent, we placed another sensor. The device clicked fast, then froze with the needle locked. The geologist tapped it gently, but nothing moved. When he picked it up, the metal felt icy even in the warm air. He set it down quickly and wiped his hands on his trousers. We moved deeper. Steam rolled across the ground in low sheets. It twisted in shapes that almost looked like people walking at a distance. No one said that out loud. We just kept our spacing and watched the corners of our vision. The hum pressed through our boots and into our chests. It felt stronger with every step toward the vents. One of the young riflemen stayed close to me. He was steady on most days, but the basin had worn him down. When the wind shifted a little, he grabbed my arm. He said he heard someone call his name. The voice was faint, almost behind us. No one had spoken. I told him to stay focused and keep his eyes ahead. We reached a new crack in the earth. It was not there the day before. The edges were sharp, and the gap was deep enough that our lights could not reach the bottom. A thin glow rose from it, faint and gray, like moonlight trapped in the rock. The hum was strongest at the edge. The medic said he felt it in his teeth. We marked the crack with flags and turned back toward camp. On the way, the radio man stopped suddenly. His headset crackled with a voice speaking in clear English, but the words sounded old, like something from another time. He lifted one side of the headset so I could hear. A calm voice counted yards in slow steps, then set a direction. It sounded like a spotter telling someone where to fire. But no artillery units were within miles. When the voice reached the number 5, it faded. The intelligence man asked for the exact words. The radio man tried to repeat them, but his voice shook. The lieutenant ordered us to hurry back before dark. When we reached camp, everything felt slightly shifted. The tents leaned a little, though the stakes were firm. The cooking gear had a thin crust of dust on it, even though we left it covered. A faint tremor rolled under us. The hum stayed steady, deeper than before. It felt like the ground listened. As we settled in, the sun dipped behind a ridge. A lake geyser blast from the far side of the basin rose higher than anything we saw before. The calm twisted, then bent sideways as if pulled by something we could not see. The dust fall thickened again and drifted through the camp like slow snow. We ate quietly. No one talked about the bunker or the log. The young rifleman kept looking toward the vent line, listening for something. The medic watched him closely. As night came, the sky stayed clear, but the basin felt darker than it should. The shadows stretched long across the ground again, pointing in directions that did not match the moon. Before turning in, I checked the perimeter. My compass drifted in slow circles. The hum rolled up my legs in steady beats. When I looked back toward camp, I saw the dust falling in those slow pulses again, as if something deep below was breathing out. I entered my tent with boots still on. The hum felt closer now, almost familiar, like it had settled under my ribs. The next day began colder than the ones before. A thin gray film covered the camp. It was not frost. It was the same dust, layered thicker than usual, as if it had settled in one heavy breath during the night. When I stepped on it, the ground felt soft, almost padded, and the hum under my boots seemed closer than ever. We broke camp early and prepared to move toward the deeper vents. The geologist wanted new samples from the area around the crack we found. The lieutenant agreed, though no one looked pleased about returning there. The young rifleman who heard the voice stayed close to the medic. He looked pale, like he had not slept. On the way out, we reached a patch of ground where the dust rose with each step, forming small rings in the air. The rings spun slowly, then drifted apart. I tried not to stare, but the pattern reminded me of something breathing. The others saw it too. No one mentioned it. We just moved faster. The basin seemed larger again. Landmarks did not match what we remembered. The ridge, where the radio man found the signal, looked farther away. The vent lines stretched longer. Even the air felt stretched, like the space between breaths had widened. My compass needle drifted the whole time, never settling for more than a second. At the crack, the faint gray glow still rose from below. It pulsed in slow waves. Each pulse matched the hum under us. When we stood near the edge, the air cooled enough to fog our breath. The geologist knelt beside the crack and lowered a small probe. He said the depth readings made no sense. It dropped straight down for a long distance, then the numbers froze. He checked the device twice, same result. He backed away without a word. We moved on to place a new set of markers and to test the soil. One soldier, a quiet man who never complained, kept looking toward the steam. He said he felt watched. I did not dismiss him. The basin carried that feeling more strongly each hour. Near an old fallen trunk, a sudden tremor hit us. It was stronger than before. The ground buckled under our feet. Steam burst from a new vent. In that moment, the young rifleman slipped into a cloud of rising white. I lunged for him, but my hand closed on empty air. When the steam cleared, his rifle lay on the ground. The metal was icy cold, coated in thick dust. There was no sign of him. We searched the entire area. No tracks, no slide marks, nothing. The dust around the rifle was smooth, as if no one had ever walked there. The lieutenant called his name again and again, but the basin swallowed the sound. The medic stared at the steam for a long time. He wiped his hands on his trousers, the same way he did after strange finds, then said we should move. The loss sank into all of us. One man gone without a trace in full daylight. The intelligence man wrote notes at a fast pace. He did not look shaken. It bothered me more than the ground. We headed toward the northern boundary. The wind stayed still again. At one point, the radio man picked up a faint call. It sounded like our missing soldier, repeating part of a sentence he said earlier that morning. The words trailed off before the name. The radio man tore off the headset and swore under his breath, then apologized. The lieutenant took the headset and listened, but the voice did not return. We reached the grove with the buried bunker again. The intelligence man ordered us to check the slab one more time. We brushed away the dust. The marks on the concrete looked deeper now, though none of us had touched them the day before. They curved like long scratches made by something dragged across the surface. The medic said they were fresh. The lieutenant said they were old. No one argued. Farther in the grove, we found a second concrete shape, smaller, barely visible under roots. It looked like part of the same structure. A rusted metal hatch rested beside it, half lifted from the soil. It was shaped like an old cellar door. The hinges snapped when we touched it. Under it lay an empty pit. A low draft came from the darkness. The draft smelled faintly of metal. We backed away slowly. The geologist looked shaken now. He kept glancing at the basin map folded in his hand. I asked what he saw. He said the tremor pattern was repeating the same shape from past decades, matching the 1918 cycle and another from 1944. Before he could finish, the intelligence man cut him off and told him to keep moving. We returned to camp late in the afternoon. The air felt wrong again. The shadows stretched even longer across the ground. The dust fell in thicker flakes, drifting sideways without any wind. It touched my face and made my skin feel numb for a moment. The medic checked me, then checked his own hands. We gathered near the tents to speak quietly. The radio man said the echo in the transmissions had grown sharper. Some words came back clearer than the ones he sent. The worst part, he said, was that the echo sometimes carried a tone none of us used. A tired tone, almost like someone speaking through water. The lieutenant tried to hold the unit together. He ordered us to rest, but no one slept easily. I lay awake again, listening to the slow pulse under the ground. It matched the basin's rhythm. It matched the dust fall. It matched the hum that seemed to move under my ribs. Sometime near midnight, a faint voice drifted through the camp. It sounded like someone calling from far behind the vents. We all heard it. The lieutenant said it was steam moving through cracks. The medic whispered that steam does not speak in full words. I stayed awake until dawn, watching the dust fall in slow breaths across the tents. It rose and settled in the same repeating pattern, like the land itself was waiting. By the fourth morning, the basin felt tighter around us, as if the ground had drawn in its edges. The dust lay thicker on our gear. The hum underfoot sounded steadier, closer to the surface. No one said it, but we all felt it pressing at the back of our thoughts. We gathered near the tents while the geologist studied his notes. He looked worn down. His pencil trembled as he circled a point on the map. The intelligence man watched him with a patient stare, waiting for him to speak. The lieutenant stood beside them, gripping his clipboard like a grip on a rifle. The geologist finally said the tremors were following the same pattern recorded in 1918 and again in 1944. The same rise, the same pause, the same pulsing line across the basin floor. He said those earlier events also came with unusual fog, animal deaths, and navigation trouble. His voice fell lower when he added that both earlier cycles ended in sealed zones and burned land. The lieutenant asked why none of this was in our briefing. I watched the intelligence man. He did not look surprised. He only asked the geologist to be exact. The geologist said the current pattern was moving faster, as if something below had learned the timing. That was when the medic stepped forward and said the white dust did not match any mineral he knew. It melted cold on contact and dried skin in seconds. He said it reacted to moisture like frost, but it came from a clear sky. He worried it was rising from deep vents. He tried to speak calmly, but he kept wiping his hands on his trousers. The intelligence man listened without blinking. When the geologist said that someone in command already knew this cycle would return, the intelligence man gave a small nod, not an apology, more like a quiet confirmation. He said our mission had another part. We were there to mark how far the basin reached into men's minds when the cycle peaked. He said the charges we carried were not only for mapping. They were meant to open or release pressure under the vents, even if the results were uncertain. No one liked that word, uncertain. The riflemen looked at each other. The radio man stared at the ground. The lieutenant asked for exact orders. The intelligence man said the orders were written into our deployment and that command expected us to follow them. We moved out anyway. We had no other choice. The ground under us felt warm in patches. The dust fell in slow pulses again. It drifted around our boots, rising and falling in rings. I felt a faint cold drift across my neck, the same one I felt in the bunker. As we walked toward the deeper vents, the geologist grew quieter. He checked his instruments more often. The needle on one device spun slowly, repeating the same 3 points again and again. He stared at it for a long time. When I asked what it meant, he said the readings were looping, as if the device was catching the same moment on repeat. When we reached a wide patch of steaming ground, a rifleman froze in place. His eyes fixed on the mist. He whispered that someone was standing there just beyond the steam. I looked, but saw only shifting white shapes. He stepped forward. I grabbed his harness and pulled him back. The medic checked him. His pulse raced. His skin felt cold even in the warm air. He said he heard a voice calling his name, same tone as the voice we heard the night before. I held him by the shoulder until he steadied. We placed the first set of charges. The ground vibrated under our hands. The dust lifted in a long, slow rise, as if the basin was aware of us again. The hum grew sharper. It pressed through my chest. A faint echo moved in the steam. Not a shape, more like a shifting outline that faded when I blinked. The radio man said the echo in his headset had changed. It now repeated words in a tired voice, almost identical to his own. He said it felt like hearing himself speak from a distant room. The lieutenant ordered him to switch channels, but the echo followed each change. When we set the final charge of the day, the ground shuddered. A fresh crack tore open a few yards from us. Light rose from it, faint and gray. The windless air shifted. The dust moved in slow circles around the fissure. The medic reached out as if feeling a breeze. then pulled his hand back fast. He said the air carried a cold pulse, like a heartbeat drifting through stone. The geologist whispered that the pulse matched the old cycle maps exactly. The intelligence man wrote that down without looking up. The lieutenant asked if the cycle would peak soon. The geologist nodded. We headed back to camp in a tight formation. Behind us, the crack kept glowing in steady waves. The hum followed us like a slow footstep. By the time we reached the tents, the sky had dimmed even though the sun still hung high. The basin felt heavier, as if a thought had settled over it, waiting to see our next move. The basin stayed quiet that evening, too quiet for a place full of vents and cracks. The steam rose in thin lines, almost straight, as if something heavy pressed down on the air. The dust drifted again in slow pulses, rising and settling in the same steady rhythm. It matched the hum under my boots. It matched the faint echo in the radio man's headset. It matched the glow rising from the new fissure to the east. We gathered near the tents. No one lit a lamp. The natural light felt weak, but none of us wanted to draw attention with a flame. The lieutenant tried to speak with confidence, but his voice carried strain. He said command expected us to continue with the plan. The charges needed to be planted in a full ring before the cycle reached its peak. The geologist looked uneasy. He said the cycle might already be past the safe point. When the lieutenant asked what safe meant, the geologist lowered his eyes. He said both earlier cycles ended with sudden changes in the land. Temperature spikes, strange fog, dead soldiers recorded as lost to the weather. He said the last unit in 1944 left behind notes that never reached the public. The intelligence man stepped forward and told him to stop sharing unnecessary details. That only made things worse. The men stared at each other with slow, steady worry. They understood what had been hidden from us. We were not only there to contain the anomaly, we were there to see what it did to us. A tremor rolled under the camp. The dust lifted, then settled in the same slow beat. The radio man flinched. He said the echo in his headset had changed again. It repeated our earlier transmissions, but with slight differences. The rhythm was off. Some words were missing. Some sounded stretched. He said it felt like listening to a message spoken through a long tunnel. We set out to reinforce the northern edge of the perimeter. The riflemen moved slower now, taking wider spacing. The hum grew clearer with each step. Not louder, just sharper, like a tone that finally found the right pitch. My chest tightened each time the ground pulsed. The medic kept wiping the back of his hands across his trousers as if something cold clung to his skin. At the northern edge, we found a new shape in the soil. It looked like the outline of a pool, though no water stood inside it. The dust slid in small waves across the hollow. When the wind shifted, the waves changed direction with perfect timing, moving like a slow breath. The geologist knelt beside it and said the shape matched a feature from the 1918 report. The intelligence man told him to stand up and keep moving. We pressed farther north until the trees thickened again. A faint draft drifted between the trunks, cold and steady. It carried a metallic scent. The medic said the smell reminded him of old bunkers back home where the air never turned over. When he exhaled, his breath fogged, even though the air temperature should have been too warm for that. Beyond the last row of trees, we found a shallow depression. At the center lay another piece of old concrete, cracked and broken open. A few iron nails were scattered beside it. They looked out of place, too clean for the age of the structure. One nail glimmered faintly in the dim light. When I picked it up, it felt cold and dry, almost weightless. Then the ground pulsed hard. The dust rose in a fast ring around us. Steam burst from a narrow gap to our right. A shape flickered inside the steam, tall and thin, gone before I could focus. The riflemen raised their weapons, but the steam closed in on itself and vanished. We pulled back in a loose formation. The hum changed tone as we moved. It shifted from a low pulse to a steady beat, almost like a slow engine warming. The geologist stopped walking for a moment. He said the pulse pattern matched the final readings from 1944, right before the old unit vanished. His voice cracked on the last word. Back at camp, the tents leaned again. Not much, just enough to notice. The compass needles drifted without pause. Even the mess kits had a thin rim of dust around their edges, shaped like soft rings. The place felt as if it had learned our movements and was adjusting itself around us. The lieutenant called us together and said we would continue with the last stage of placement the next morning. The geologist looked like he wanted to argue, but he said nothing. The intelligence man simply nodded and wrote another line in his notebook. That night, I lay in my tent and kept my boots on, same as before. The hum under the ground matched my heartbeat. The dust drifted through a small seam above me, falling in slow, steady breaths. The faint cold settled on my cheek again, the same cold I felt in the bunker and near the cracks. I told myself it was nothing. Just steam, just tremors, just tension. But deep down, I felt something else. The basin was not reacting to the land alone, it was reacting to us. Watching, waiting, matching our steps with its own slow breath. The morning of the final placement came with a strange stillness. No wind, no birds, no distant geyser bursts, only that steady hum rising through the ground in slow, measured beats. The dust came down in heavier pulses, thick enough to coat our sleeves before we reached the first vent. The lieutenant pushed us forward with tight orders. His voice carried strain, but he kept moving. The intelligence man stayed close behind him, watching the basin like he was waiting for a sign only he knew how to read. The geologist walked slower than before. He kept looking at his instruments and shaking his head. We reached the ring of vents just before sunrise. The cracks in the earth had widened. Some had merged into long slashes filled with dim gray light. The steam rose in tall sheets, drifting sideways even though the air did not move. When the hum pulsed, the steam shifted in time with it, as if drawn by the same rhythm. We began placing the deeper charges first. I drove the anchors into the ground while the medic watched the steam. The others held spacing and kept their rifles ready. The soil felt soft and warm, as if the surface lay over something breathing close below. At each placement point, the hum grew sharper. It pressed through my chest and made my ribs feel tight. The dust slid along the ground in small circles that spun around our boots. The geologist whispered that the cycle had hit its peak. The intelligence man said to keep going. We moved to the next set of vents. A low tremor rolled under us. The ground dropped a few inches, then rose. A tall column of steam burst from a vent behind us. When it thinned, we saw a shape inside it. Something long, something narrow, something standing still for a moment before fading back into the gray. One rifleman fired a burst without thinking. The shots scattered across the rocks. The lieutenant yelled at him to hold fire. The medic grabbed his arm and told him to breathe. The rifleman kept staring at the vent, whispering that someone had looked back at him. We pressed on. The hum built with each charge we set. At one point, my hands shook while tightening the last clamp. Not from fear. From the vibration rising through the metal itself. It felt like the charge was humming along with the ground. The radio man tried calling command again. The headset carried only that same echo of our earlier messages. The tone was weaker now, almost stretched thin. When he tried a new channel, a voice came through for a moment. A calm voice. A tired voice. It said a number. Then it said a direction. The same way the old reports described artillery spotters. The radio man went pale. He said the voice sounded like ours, but older. We reached the center of the ring just as the sun climbed above the ridge. Light fell across the vents and made the dust glow faintly. A new fissure opened near us with a sharp crack. Cold air rushed out of it. The cold felt clean at first, then heavy, then strangely aware. It moved across my face like a slow breath checking for warmth. The geologist stepped toward the fissure with his notes. He stopped at the edge and stared down. The gray light below pulsed in steady waves. Each pulse matched the hum under us. He whispered that the pattern was not natural. It was repeating with purpose. He had no other word. The lieutenant ordered us to stand ready. The intelligence man told him to detonate as soon as the last charge line reached full signal. The geologist tried to speak again, but the ground shook hard enough to knock him to a knee. Steam blasted upward from 3 vents at once. The air went cold. The radio man shouted that the signal line was complete. The lieutenant gave the order. The charges detonated across the basin in a rising chain of thuds. The ground heaved under us. A ring of dull flashes lit the vents. The hum broke into a long, heavy pulse, louder than any before. Then the basin cracked wide open. A column of dim light rose from the center. Not bright, more like lit fog turning upward from deep rock. Every metal object around us vibrated. My dog tags rattled against my chest. The rifles hummed in our hands. The dust lifted into the air in a tight spiral. The steam spread in high walls. Voices echoed through it. Not clear words, more like pieces of speech carried too far, bending in the air. Some sounded like men calling ranges. Some sounded like our missing soldier. Some sounded like us. We scattered across the shifting ground. The vents burst again, higher and sharper. The gray light stretched over the basin like a thin veil. The hum beat in steady, slow rhythm, like a heart waking after a long sleep. The lieutenant shouted for us to hold the perimeter. The geologist ran toward the center with his notes clutched to his chest. The medic tried to stop him, but the geologist pushed forward, staring at the light like he had found the answer he had been chasing. The intelligence man yelled at us not to fall back. He said the anomaly had to be measured, not avoided. But the ground shook harder. The vents bent sideways. The dust lifted in twisting columns. The hum grew so sharp, I felt it in my teeth. Then, something shifted in the steam. Not a shape. A movement. A slow lean forward, as if something listened and stepped closer. We pulled back in uneven lines. The medic lost his footing. I grabbed him and pulled him upright. The rifleman formed a rough circle around the fissure. The radio man said the echoes in his headset were now repeating our words before we said them. The hum rose again, steady and patient. The ground under us warmed. The dust drifted across our boots in slow breaths. Everything in the basin had turned toward us. Everything felt like it was waiting. The ground kept shaking in short, steady pulses. Not violent. Not wild. Just firm enough to make each step feel unsure, like walking across a chest that was breathing under us. The dust rose and fell in thin waves. Every breath of the basin matched the hum running through my legs. The lieutenant tried to hold the unit together. He yelled for everyone to regroup near the old ridge line, but the steam thickened between us. The shapes in it moved with slow intent, appearing and fading as the mist folded around them. None stayed long enough to see clearly. All felt close. The geologist had gone too far. He stood near the central fissure, holding his notes against his chest. The gray light washed over him. He stared down with a calm face, as if the glow had shown him something he had waited years to understand. I called to him. He did not answer. He only leaned a little closer. The medic ran toward him. I followed. The air cooled with each step. My breath fogged in front of me. When I reached the geologist, he whispered that the cycle was older than the park itself. He said the pulses answered thought, not sound. Before he could say more, the ground near the fissure dropped a few inches. A new crack opened under his right boot. He did not move away. He kept staring down. I grabbed him by the harness and pulled. The medic took his other arm. For a moment, he resisted, as if drawn forward by something we could not see. Then the hum surged sharp enough to rattle my teeth. He flinched and stepped back. We dragged him away from the edge. Behind us, the lieutenant tried to set a defensive line, but the riflemen struggled to keep formation. The ground rose and dropped in slow waves. Steam crossed between them like drifting walls. The intelligence man stood at the center of the group, shouting that we needed to hold position for new readings. He said the anomaly had reached its highest point and would never show itself like this again. A vent burst open behind him. The blast threw dust and gray mist across the camp. For a moment, the intelligence man froze. When the cloud passed, he turned in a slow circle, looking at the steam as if something had whispered in his ear. He told us not to move. He said the basin would stabilize if we held our ground. No one believed him. Not after the missing soldier. Not after the voices in the radio. Not after the glow rising from the cracks. The radio man yelled that the echoes had shifted again. Now, they repeated our present words with slight changes. Some lines came back with missing pieces. Some returned with added ones. One echo returned before he even spoke. He tore off the headset and threw it on the ground. Then the hum changed tone. It deepened and slowed, steady as a long heartbeat. The dust rose again in tight rings. The steam leaned toward us, like a breath moving through a narrow hallway. Shapes flickered inside it. Some looked like tall figures. Some like men carrying rifles. Some like animals. Each appeared for a blink, then vanished into the mist. None stayed long enough to be sure. The lieutenant ordered a retreat to the tree line. The intelligence man tried to overrule him, but no one listened anymore. The riflemen began falling back. The medic pulled the geologist with him. The radio man stayed close to me, his hands shaking. I looked back toward the vents. The fissure at the center widened again. The gray light climbed higher, rising like a slow column. The surface of the crack shifted in dull waves, as if something deep below moved in time with the hum. I knew we could not leave it like that. The charges we set had opened more than they closed. The old logbook had warned about sealing, not venting. The line, "seal it or feed it," repeated in my head. I finally understood what it meant. I told the medic and radio man to get the others to the tree line. The lieutenant shouted at me to fall back. I said nothing. I ran toward the fissure with the last pack of demolition charges strapped to my back. The steam thickened around me. The dust rose in a tall, slow spiral. The hum sharpened until my chest felt tight. I kept my eyes on the fissure. It pulsed like a lung. When I reached the edge, the ground trembled again. The cold rising from below carried a strange weight, like a quiet question. I set the charges as fast as I could. My hand shook. The metal felt warm where it should have been cold. The dust clung to my sleeves like soft ash. A shadow passed behind the steam, a tall shape. Not clear, not close, just watching. I finished the line and backed away. The fissure pulsed in long waves. The ground under my boots felt thin. The dust swirled in small rings around my legs. I triggered the charges. The blast tore through the ridge. A slab of earth crashed down into the fissure. The gray light bent, then twisted, then folded in on itself. The hum broke into a long, low rumble. The steam walls thinned. The shapes inside the mist faded at once. The basin fell silent. Only small flakes of dust drifted down, slow and gentle, like the last breath of the land settling into the cracks. Behind me, the others called my name. Their voices carried clean through the air for the first time in days. I stepped back from the sealed fissure and felt the ground steady under my boots. The hum remained, but quieter, deeper below, as if pushed back into the rock. It felt like the basin had stopped watching us, at least for that moment. We left the basin slowly, one careful step at a time. The ground felt steadier, but not safe. The dust still drifted in soft flakes, though each fall seemed lighter, as if the land no longer pushed it out with purpose. The gray glow had faded under the collapsed ridge. Only thin steam lingered, rising in weak threads. The lieutenant led us toward the tree line. His voice was low and tired. The riflemen followed in silence, each man watching the edges of the basin as if something might pull itself free again. The medic stayed close to the geologist, who walked without raising his head. The radio man held his headset in both hands, unsure if he should try one more call. When he lifted it to his ear, he heard only static. No echo. No strange voice, just empty hiss. We reached the trees and took a long pause. The air there felt different. No pulse in the soil, no drifting rings of dust. Only cold wind moving between the trunks. For the first time in days, I did not feel the hum under my ribs. The quiet made me uneasy. After hearing that rhythm for so long, the stillness felt like another kind of warning. The lieutenant counted us. Too few. He stopped halfway through and lowered his eyes. No one spoke the missing names. The basin held them, and we knew it would not give them back. We moved toward the old road carrying only what we needed. The intelligence man walked behind us, writing notes in short lines. He never looked shaken. He only showed mild frustration that the readings were incomplete. At one point, he stopped and stared back toward the vents, as if something unfinished called to him from the quiet. Then he closed his notebook and followed. The walkout felt longer than the walk-in. The trees seemed denser, the shadows deeper. Every small sound made us turn our heads. The medic said it was normal after stress, but his voice lacked confidence. He kept flexing his fingers, checking for that cold numbness the dust always left behind. We reached the road by early afternoon. A convoy waited there. Unmarked trucks. Men in plain coats who did not salute. They guided us into the back without asking questions. The lieutenant tried to report our casualties, but one of the plain-coated men told him to save it for later. The doors shut. The trucks pulled away. Through the small slits in the sideboards, I watched the trees fade behind us. The basin lay hidden beyond them like a quiet memory, sealed for now, but not gone. At the airfield, medics checked us one by one. They took blood samples, asked short questions, and wrote notes without telling us the results. A doctor placed a cool hand on my wrist and asked if I felt any vibration in my chest. I said no. It was true, but somewhere deep inside, in a place harder to reach, I still sensed a faint, slow echo. Not painful, not strong, just familiar. We were moved into a small room with metal walls and told to wait. Hours passed. The geologist stared at the floor. The radio man sat with his hands folded, watching his headset on the table like it might speak again. The medic leaned back with his eyes closed, his face lined with quiet exhaustion. When a major entered, he carried a file that looked too thin for all that had happened. He said the basin would be recorded as a geothermal accident. He said the missing men would be listed as lost to unstable ground. He said the charges we set had caused a collapse that disrupted readings for the entire valley. He spoke calmly, like someone reading a weather report. The lieutenant asked what we should write in our statements. The major answered that our statements had already been prepared. He placed the papers on the table. The intelligence man urged us to sign. His tone was soft, almost polite. I read the first lines. None of them matched the truth. The story said nothing about the hum, the dust, the voices, or the light rising from the fissure. It said nothing about the way the land breathed under our boots. It said nothing about the men who vanished in the steam. The lieutenant signed first. He did it with a steady hand. The others followed with slow reluctance. When the paper came to me, I held the pen for a moment. The basin had gone quiet, but the memory of its slow rhythm sat deep under my ribs. I signed anyway. We all knew the truth would never leave that room. Afterward, they sent us to separate bunks and told us to rest. The lights stayed low. The hallway stayed quiet. When I lay on the cot, the silence felt heavy but natural. No pulse in the metal pipes. No dust drifting in soft rings. Just the still air of a base far from the basin. I should have felt safe. But the quiet only reminded me how close the hum had been, how patient it felt, how aware. Long after midnight, when the room had gone cold, I closed my eyes. For a moment, I heard nothing. Then, faint and far under my memory, I thought I felt a single slow beat, as if something deep below the rock had taken one last breath. They released us in small groups over the next few days. No ceremony, no report out, just a short handshake from an officer who looked past us, not at us. The lieutenant received orders to another post. The medic was sent to a hospital unit. The radio man stayed behind for extra tests. The geologist left with the intelligence man in a separate car, both silent as they drove off. None of us asked where they were going. I returned to my home unit at Fort Lewis. The place felt normal at first. Regular drills, regular noise, regular mornings. But the rhythm of my days no longer matched the rhythm inside me. Some nights, I felt the faint echo of the basin under my ribs, a slow, distant beat that rose only when the world grew quiet. I avoided talking about the mission, not because of the papers we signed, because no one would believe how the land felt alive under our boots, how the dust rose in steady breaths, how the steam moved as if listening, how the hum stayed patient, waiting for something none of us understood. A few weeks later, I saw a short note in a local paper. It said a small area of Yellowstone had been closed for routine maintenance. No location given. Just a line about visitor safety. I folded the page and put it in my coat pocket. The closure came too soon after we left. Too clean to be chance. Years passed. I served in other places, other conflicts. I saw things far from home that could break a man. Yet none of them followed me the way that basin did. Sometimes, late at night, when a machine in the hallway kicked on with a low, steady rhythm, I felt that same faint cold drift along my cheek. It never stayed long, just enough to remind me. I kept the folded news clipping in a drawer beside my bed. Every few years, another small story appeared. A trail closed. A vent line shifted. A quiet report of hikers who vanished near an unmarked ridge. The cycle never stopped. It only paused. I did not return to Yellowstone. I never planned to. But when those nights grew very still and the house settled in slow creaks, I sometimes sensed the old rhythm rising far below the world. Slow, calm, patient, as if the basin remembered us, as if it waited for its next breath. I am an old man now, far from the days when I marched across hot ground with a rifle on my shoulder. Most people who knew about that mission are gone, moved on, or kept quiet by the same papers we signed. Yet the memory has stayed with me in a way nothing else has. Not the other tours. Not the long nights overseas. Only that quiet basin in Yellowstone, where the ground breathed under our boots. I never told my family the truth. I never wanted them looking at the world with that same doubt. The hum stayed with me for years, faint but steady, rising only when the world around me fell silent. Sometimes I would stand in my kitchen late at night and hear the refrigerator motor turn on in a low pulse. The sound carried a familiar weight. I would wait to see if the dust drifted through a stray beam of light. Most nights, nothing happened. Some nights, a tiny cold flake would settle on my wrist before melting away. I never returned to the park. I never needed to. The place stayed alive in my memory, shifting and breathing in that slow rhythm. I still keep a small box of old clippings. Trail closures. Missing hikers. Sudden steam bursts, each one spaced by a few years, always in the same quiet corner the maps never name. Maybe the charges we set slowed the cycle. Maybe they only taught the basin how far we were willing to go. I cannot say. I only know what I felt under my boots that day and how the land seemed to learn our steps. When the nights grow still and the house holds its breath for a moment, I sometimes feel a soft echo deep inside my chest. Not painful, not sharp, just steady, like a slow signal rising through stone. If the rhythm returns in full again, someone younger will be sent to listen. I hope they understand what waits under that quiet ground. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the ones showing right now on your screen.